Greetings lovely folks, welcome to another video. My name is Kat and today I'm going to be discussing some of the tools and mediums I use as a model horse artist and some of my best tips for using them. Let's get into it. First up, the medium I use most, soft pastels. I personally use these lovely earth tone pastels by Mugno as well as these soft pan pastels. All of my horse's base coats are pastel work from the primer layer up, so safe to say I use them a lot. I tend to use a lot of black in my customs, as you can tell by how ground down my black pastel stick is. I go through it like no tomorrow, hence why I picked up a black pan pastel as well. Pan pastels have stronger pigment and smoother application than chalk pastels, as you can see here, but I enjoy working with both. Top tip the first, when you finish a layer of pastels, as I've done here on this Collecte Stallion, use a fairly stiff but soft brush to get rid of all the excess pastel dust before you seal it. Excess pastel dust is a leading cause of blotchy pastels when the sealant soaks into it and dries. Top tip the second, when working with pastels, I strongly advise wearing a mask, bandana, or other face covering. Pastels are extremely dusty when being used, and inhaling pastel dust over time can cause health problems. Stay safe, fellow artists. Watercolour pencils. I use these for details. These were a gift from an artist friend I knew a few years ago and they are amazing. These are Derwent. They have a huge range of earth tones and they sharpen really nicely. Top tip for watercolour pencils is use a knife to sharpen your pencils. You'll have better control than with a pencil sharpener and your pencils are less likely to break. Watercolour pencils crumble easily under pressure. I use watercolour pencils for hair details, mapping out white markings, small markings like Appaloosa spots, and hoof detailing. They're also very versatile. You can use them dry directly onto your model to add details, or use a small wet brush to lift colour from the pencil and paint onto your model. I use this method to reach corners and creases that my pencils can't get into. Another tip is seal your pencil work as soon as you finish it. Any accidental contact with water or diluted acrylic will reactivate the watercolour pigment and ruin your dreams. I speak from experience. Acrylics. I mainly use acrylics for white markings, eyes and manes and tails. I personally use Boldmere and Crawford and Black acrylics. They're vibrant and hold colour really well when dry. I'm going to delve deeper into working with acrylics in a separate video, but my top tip for acrylics in general, especially when painting a base coat, is dilute your acrylics with water. As I'm showing here, acrylics tend to look quite flat or thick if they're used neat onto models, especially in multiple layers. It can obscure the fine details on Collecte and Schleich, and also lose brushstrokes when used on Breyers. It also takes ages to apply a solid coat on rougher coated models like this mini Shetland. I was really struggling to get the paint to fill all the tiny marks on this pony, and it would take perhaps 2 or 3 coats to fill in all the tiny gaps and details, by which point the coat starts to look chunky and the paint fills in the hair marks in the sculpt. I find it works best when mixed to a milky consistency with water and applied in several thin coats to build up opacity. Acrylic is a water-based paint, so it mixes smoothly with water. This method gives a much smoother coat, preserving the detailing on the model. Working in thin layers allows you to build a realistic gradient into a base coat or mane and tail hair, and your paint will go a lot further. As I mentioned previously, I'll be doing a more in-depth tutorial on working with acrylics soon, where I'll elaborate on this method and go over how to use dry brushing methods in combination with diluted paints to create colour gradients. But for now, here's a little side-by-side comparison. One side of the model has a single solid coat of acrylic, while the other has 6 thin layers of milk consistency paint. Let's talk about sealant. I use Humbrol acrylic sealant in matte to seal my models between layers and as a final finish. I know a lot of artists use Mr. Superclear, Vallejo, or similar sealants, but I prefer Humbrol for several reasons. The first is that it's less toxic than MSC. The second is that it's a smaller can and fits in my hand nicely, but that's a personal preference. And the third and main reason is preserving my work's details. A lot of sealants will turn pale pastels almost invisible when saturated. Humbrol acrylics don't do this. I can apply light pastels on top of a dark base coat, and Humbrol doesn't drown them or fade them out in the way heavier sealants do. Safety tip: always wear a filtration mask and eye protection when using sealants or aerosol paints. The fumes can be toxic, and you don't want a breeze blowing primer spray back in your eyes. Been there, done that. Brushes and Q-tips. I use these soft fluffy brushes to do pastel work, including this tiny one for small pastel details and faces. I also use this one for brushing off excess pastel dust before sealing a layer. These are my detailing brushes. I got these on Amazon. They're not very expensive, but they've held up better than I anticipated. Q-tips are great for cleaning up or removing watercolour pencil marks, blending out pastels, and getting into fiddly places with acetone to remove dirt or factory paint. Lastly, gloves. I use nitrile gloves whenever I'm handling a model. This prevents transference of any oils on my skin onto the model. I also wear them when using sealants or primer. Thank you for spending some of your time here today. I hope you found this video useful. If this is your first time visiting, this channel is all about model horse customizing, tips and tutorials, so if that sounds like your cup of tea, feel free to hit the subscribe button and turn on notifications so you don't miss any future uploads. I aim to upload a new video every Monday if possible. If you'd like to stay up to date on my customs and projects, follow me on Instagram, link is in my channel description. Happy painting, and I'll see you next week. Bye!